phone vibrated and then stopped. The last message: "I'm going to eat with Sarah." That was the last time Adrianne Reynolds, a 16-year-old who had recently moved to Illinois from Texas, had spoken to anyone in her family. Adrianne was the kind of girl you'd notice in a crowd. Dark brown hair, piercing eyes, and a smile that was a little rakish, but endearing. She had been an active student, interested in theater and alternative rock. After moving in with her father in East Moline, she quickly made friends at the Black Hawk Vocational Center and seemed to fit in well. Among her new friends, the most prominent were Sarah, a strong-willed, somewhat mysterious girl, and Corey, who had been a constant presence by their side. January 21st, 2005 was overcast and bitterly cold. Adrianne disappeared after school without a trace. Her room was neat, her schedule hadn't changed, not a single late text, not a single goodbye. And the strangest thing of all, when asked one last time, when they saw Adrianne together, each of their close friends answered differently. So what really happened after that fateful lunch? On January 21st, 2005, around 11 a.m., Adrianne Reynolds was last seen at the Black Hawk Vocational Training Center in East Moline. It was a Friday, and students were allowed to leave at noon if they had completed their classes for the week. Adrianne, along with Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory, are believed to have left the center together. The three traveled in Sarah's car, heading toward a nearby business district. According to later accounts, they stopped at a Taco Bell for lunch. Some employees at the store recalled seeing three teenagers, including a brunette who appeared uncomfortable. However, they did not record exactly when the group left. After lunch, the trip was supposed to end there. But instead of returning home or to school, the group turned into an empty parking lot near an industrial area south of the city. It was a secluded area, usually only occupied by trucks at night. This is where the timing and accounts began to differ. Sarah said that Adrianne had called someone else to pick her up. Corey said that they left Adrianne there because she wanted to walk home. But a local delivery man, passing by the area around 1:15 p.m., reported seeing three teenagers arguing next to a silver-gray car, a detail that matched Sarah's car. However, he did not stop because he thought it was just a normal student conflict. That afternoon, Sarah and Corey returned to school as if nothing had happened. Some classmates remembered that Sarah was unusually quiet, while Corey did not show up for class as scheduled. In particular, a student named Sean McKittrick, who Sarah had invited to go with her that afternoon, recalled that he had initially been invited, but then suddenly canceled for no apparent reason. When Adrianne failed to return home that evening and failed to show up for her shift at Checkers, her family began calling her. Tellingly, when she called Sarah, she was cold and replied that she didn't know where Adrianne was. However, old text messages between the two revealed that they had had a long history of conflict, something that had never been shared with anyone at the school. On the morning of January 22, 2005, a maintenance worker found what appeared to be a school jacket stuffed into a trash can behind the school. Although there were no visible signs of damage, the location of the item made the school administration suspicious. They began checking cameras around the school, but by then, the previous day's footage had been automatically overwritten by the system due to storage limitations. A student at the school said that they saw Sarah and Corey together near the backyard after lunch that day, which had no cameras, but was adjacent to a small wooded area behind the school. As all the clues began to fall into place, something strange became clear. The last people to be with Adrianne were all telling different stories, but they all avoided a time period that stretched from 12:30 to 2 p.m. 6:15 p.m., January 21st, 2005. Adrianne Reynolds did not show up for her shift at the fast food restaurant as usual. She did not text to report being late, nor did she return any calls. Her father, who had just taken her in for a few weeks, began to feel uneasy when he asked friends about her whereabouts, but no one knew. At 7 p.m., he called the East Moline Police Department to report her missing. The police quickly took action because the victim was a minor with a good academic record, no criminal record, and a recent transfer. On the morning of January 22nd, a janitor at Black Hawk High School, where Adrianne attended school, found a women's jacket in a trash can behind Building D. It was the type of jacket Adrianne often wore to class. There was no blood or tearing, but the way it was left caught the attention of investigators. It was near a backyard where there were no security cameras. That morning, police compiled a list of Adrianne's last contacts. The first name that came up was Sarah Kolb, a classmate at the center. Sarah said the three of them, she, Adrianne, and Corey Gregory, had gone to lunch together, then went their separate ways. Corey said the same, but added that Adrianne appeared to be waiting for someone to pick her up. There was no evidence to support that. Adrianne had not been seen leaving with a stranger. There were no security cameras. No taxis, buses, or acquaintances had called to pick her up. Everything seemed to have stopped by noon that day. On January 24th, police interviewed another student, Sean McKittrick, who said Sarah had initially invited him to lunch that day, but he abruptly canceled without explanation. It was the first time Sean had been left out of lunch, as he had been for weeks. This detail, though small, began to make police suspicious. Had Adrianne's companions been pre-selected? When police checked the cameras at Taco Bell, the place where the group had eaten, they found only a short clip. A silver sedan believed to be Sarah's left the parking lot with 3 people. But when they returned, only 2 were in the car. No one knew when Adrianne left. On the afternoon of January 26, a hunter called the hotline. He said that while hiking near Aledo, more than 20 miles from the original scene, he had seen char and what looked like charred bones under a tree. Investigators rushed to the scene. They found scattered human tissue, charred bones, and a few personal items. That was the moment any hope of finding Adrianne alive officially ended. The case had now become a full-blown criminal investigation, and the last people who were with the girl are no longer witnesses, but prime suspects. Initially, there was only a pile of scattered ash and a small bone fragment discovered by a hunter. But after a thorough search of the area, the police gradually collected more bone fragments and soft tissue, enough to determine the identity through dental records. There was no blood at the scene, no sign of a struggle, but there was one item that caught their attention: a black, charred leather belt lying a few meters away from the pile of ash that did not belong to the victim. The belt was not intact, but the metal clasp could still be identified in its original shape. On January 27, the preliminary results of the forensic examination showed that the victim died about 3 to 4 hours before the reported time of disappearance. This means she could have died that afternoon, not long after leaving Taco Bell. The unusual thing was the neck area. There were no knife marks, no obvious trauma, but there were signs of being squeezed for a short time with enough force to cause suffocation, but no signs of resistance. This led the expert to hypothesize that either the victim was unconscious before being squeezed or was completely restrained. When the forensic team analyzed the skin and fingernails further, they found a small amount of strange DNA, not matching the victim's, trapped in dead cells under the nails. In addition, a short, light-colored hair was found between the folds of the partially burned shirt. But it was another small detail that turned the case around. On the victim's right wrist, her dominant hand, there was a faint circular print that looked like a rope mark, but there was nothing on her left hand. She had been tied, but only on one side. On the morning of January 28, 2005, when the body was identified as Adrianne Reynolds, East Moline police opened a criminal investigation. The initial case was immediately changed from missing person to unexplained death. The first person to be called back was Sarah Kolb. She maintained her story, that the 3 had just had lunch and then split up. However, when asked for details about when she left Taco Bell, Sarah could not remember and gave 3 different times in the same interview that lasted less than an hour. At noon on January 28th, the police brought Corey Gregory back in. Corey seemed nervous, but was more consistent than Sarah in the timing. However, when asked why he had left Adrianne alone in the parking lot, he hesitated and then gave an excuse. She said she wanted to stay and make a phone call. The police immediately checked Adrianne's call records. There were no calls after 12 noon on January 21st. This completely disproved Corey's explanation. On January 29th, a student named Sean McKittrick was called. He said that he had been invited to lunch that day, but Sarah had suddenly canceled the invitation just a few hours before. He found this strange because the group often went to lunch together every week. This was the first time Adrianne had replaced Sean. On the same day, when reviewing the cameras around Taco Bell, the police found a blurry clip of a silver sedan leaving the parking lot, matching Sarah's vehicle. In the frame, 3 silhouettes could be seen entering the car, but only 2 returned later. One in the front seat, one in the back. This contradicted the statement that the 3 parted ways after the meal. On January 30th, the second interrogation took place. This time, the atmosphere in the room was different. Sarah remained silent for most of the time. Corey was more confused. He began to ask, "If I tell you now, will it be considered aiding and abetting?" The police did not answer. They waited, waiting. After a few minutes, Corey sighed. "I didn't kill her, but I didn't stop. I stood there and Sarah used her belt." It was the first confession. Though it was incomplete, it changed the whole story of the case. On January 31st, the police returned to Sarah's grandparents' farm in Aledo, where she had been on the afternoon of January 21st. After several hours of searching, they found a small body part and a hacksaw with biological traces. There were also plastic bags, rubber gloves, and a half-burned lighter box at the scene. The police took all the evidence and sent it for testing. On February 1st, Corey signed a plea agreement with the condition that his sentence would be reduced if he cooperated fully. He told the whole story. Sarah had planned it in advance because of a conflict with Adrianne. In the car, while Adrianne was in the back seat, Sarah used a belt to strangle her from the front. Corey did not intervene. When the victim collapsed, they panicked. Then, the 2 moved the body to the farm to dispose of it. Another friend, Nathan, was asked to help with the rest. This information prompted the police to immediately summon Nathan Godet. After several hours of questioning, Nathan admitted to using a saw to dismember the body at Sarah's request, promising that everything would be fine. He was only 16 years old. In the records, there was a detail that made the investigator freeze. During the confrontation between Sarah and Corey, a recorded interrogation recorded Sarah saying, "I told her to stop, but he still held her hand." Meanwhile, Corey said, "I held her hand, but only because I didn't know what to do." 2 people, 2 testimonies, 1 undeniable truth. Adrianne was defenseless. And the final twist? A belt buckle found at the scene matched the one left in Sarah's purse. She had repaired the strap. No one knew that detail except the owner herself. In October 2005, Sarah Kolb's trial officially began in the Rock Island County Courthouse in Illinois. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former classmates, and relatives of the victim. The case was closely followed by the local media, not only because of its severity, but also because of the age of the defendants. On the first day, the atmosphere became tense. The prosecution presented the testimony of Corey Gregory, who had pleaded guilty and agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. During the trial, Corey repeated his entire confession, claiming that Sarah had initiated the strangulation and that he had acted in a state of panic. However, Sarah's attorneys strongly objected. They argued that Corey's testimony was not credible because he was trying to protect himself by blaming others. They also questioned the legality of using the testimony of a juvenile defendant to convict another juvenile. The surprise came on the 3rd day of the trial when a new witness was called. Sean McKittrick, a classmate at Black Hawk. Sean said that Sarah had repeatedly badmouthed Adrianne in front of her friends and had been upset when Adrianne became close to Corey. This testimony reinforced the theory that personal conflicts led to extreme behavior. The trial lasted nearly a week. The pieces gradually came together. The change in testimony, the evidence found at the farm, the biological traces, and the distinctive belt buckle, all of which formed a clear picture. On February 6, 2006, Sarah Kolb was convicted of 2 counts, first-degree murder and concealment of a body. The total sentence was 53 years in prison, including 48 years for the main charge and an additional 5 years for concealment. When the verdict was announced, Sarah bowed her head in silence. Adrianne's parents burst into tears. In July of the same year, Corey Gregory received a separate sentence, 45 years in prison after agreeing to cooperate with the investigation. He was held at the Pontiac Correctional Center in Illinois. Although the verdict was largely supported by the public, there was mixed opinion about the age of the defendants. Some analysts said that the sentence imposed on the two teenagers was too harsh, especially when psychological and social factors were not fully considered. However, Adrianne's family did not want a lighter sentence. In his final statement to the court, her father said, "No sentence can bring my daughter back, but at least justice has called her name." Adrianne Reynolds did not return home that evening. A 16-year-old girl, full of ambition, just starting to rebuild her life in a new place, passed away silently amidst a spiral of student jealousy and irreversible wrong decisions. The case not only took a young life, but also buried the future of 3 other teenagers. The price of jealousy, silence, and a distorted mentality that was not recognized in time is too high. It makes people ask, how many signs were overlooked? How many people saw something unusual but chose to remain silent? If there were no messages left behind, if the camera at Taco Bell had not accidentally recorded the moment the car left, if a witness had not spoken up in time, would the case have ever been solved? Adrianne's case is a reminder of the importance of surveillance technology, but it also highlights the human role in crime prevention. Being alert to behavioral deviations, especially in school-age children, is something that should not be taken lightly. And ultimately, the question remains, if you were in the room that day, would you have said something or would you have looked away? A strange status appeared on social media late on the evening of October 30th, 2022. "If I disappear, will anyone miss me?" It was just a short line among thousands of posts every day. But for Ariadna, Fernanda's loved ones, it was a quiet warning. A strange signal from the girl they believed was always strong and full of life. That evening, Ariadna put on light makeup, dressed nicely, and accepted an invitation to dinner from a new friend. The party took place in a luxurious setting. The cocktails and smiles seemed normal. But behind that glitz was something that made her constantly check her phone, look around with a wary eye, and sometimes feel lost. At 27 years old, Ariadna was not someone who could easily be caught up in a fake world. As a single mother who had fought to raise her children, overcome her mother's death, and built her own career, she knew the value of security. But that night, amid the music and chatter, something kept Ariadna from leaving the party in time. Little did she know, it would be the last night of her life. That evening, Ariadna accepted an invitation from Vanessa, a friend she had just met a few times. The meeting place was a modern restaurant where the lighting and music created a sophisticated feeling without being too ostentatious. The atmosphere in the restaurant was bustling with laughter, the sound of clinking glasses and dim yellow lights. Ariadna arrived later than the other guests, but still maintained her usual politeness. At the banquet table besides Vanessa, there was a man named Rautel, who was introduced as a big-shot businessman in the real estate industry. He appeared lively, often telling stories and raising his glass to celebrate. Vanessa sat next to him, laughing and talking comfortably, as if they had been close for a long time. Ariadna kept a moderate distance, not too enthusiastic, but not distant either. Everything went on like a normal meeting, but small details began to emerge. Ariadna kept checking her phone, occasionally frowning when reading messages and sometimes just smiling politely at Rautel's jokes. Vanessa seemed to notice this and began to drag Ariadna into conversations, pouring more wine, trying to make the atmosphere more comfortable. When the party ended, instead of saying goodbye as usual, Rautel invited everyone to his apartment to continue the evening in a more private space. Vanessa was the first to respond and persuade Ariadna to come along. After a few minutes of hesitation, she reluctantly agreed. Rautel's apartment was located in a modern high-rise building, with security and a private elevator. The interior was luxuriously decorated with soft music and dim lights. At first, the group continued to chat in the living room. However, Ariadna gradually became silent, her eyes lost in the unfamiliar scene. She looked at her phone again, as if looking for a reason to leave. Near midnight, the guests began to leave. Only 3 people remained in the apartment: Ariadna, Vanessa, and Rotel. A few text messages sent from Ariadna's phone indicated that she was uncomfortable, but still trying to keep her composure. The exact details of what happened next remain a mystery. What is known is that it was the last time anyone saw Ariadna conscious. A seemingly innocent party, a seemingly innocent invitation, and a woman who could not return home. From that moment on, things took a completely different turn. Quiet, but tumultuous. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the thick clouds of Morelos, 2 cyclists began their early morning journey. The road they had chosen that day was not a regular route, but a less traveled side road, deep in the low bushes and dry rocky soil. While talking, one of them suddenly stopped when he saw something unusual by the side of the road: a blurry figure lying motionless. At first, they thought it was just a person sleeping or unconscious from alcohol. But as they approached, a cold silence fell. The woman lay on her side, her clothes intact but covered in dirt. No signs of movement, no reflexes. A feeling of unease rose up. They did not dare touch the body, but quickly used their phones to take pictures of the scene and mark the location to call for help. They didn't know the woman's name, but they knew in their guts, this wasn't a normal situation. The authorities arrived shortly after. Local police immediately cordoned off the area, put up barricades, and began their routine work. The early morning chill and the wind blowing through the bushes made the air thick. No bag, no identification, no obvious identification, just a few tattoos and light bruises that were visible in the light. News of the woman's body spread quickly in local groups. Within hours, a few photos of the scene began to be shared online. Among those scrolling through the feed were Ariadna's relatives. A friend recognized the tattoo on her shoulder. Her brother Omar felt his stomach churn as the image popped up on his phone screen. The sister hadn't texted back since the night before. No one knew where she had gone after the party. No one heard anything unusual, but the image was too clear to deny. Omar contacted the authorities, filed a missing person report, and set out to the scene to verify. When he arrived at the scene, no identification or official confirmation was needed. A glance was enough. That tattoo, their mother's name, was unmistakable proof. In that moment, a family lost its light, and a case began to unfold from the silence of the wilderness. As the forensic team began their work, they quickly realized that the location where the body was found was not the scene of the accident. Under the dry soil, there were signs of stopped wheels, faint skid marks, and a pressed area of grass, as if someone had placed a heavy object from the car on the ground. Every detail was meticulously recorded, but the scene did not leave many direct clues. The body was transferred to the Morelos State Center for expertise. Initially, the forensic doctors concluded there were no fatal wounds, no injuries from sharp objects or firearms. A few bruises and red marks appeared scattered, mainly on the arms and shoulders, and were recorded as not serious. The initial cause given was loss of consciousness due to a physiological reaction, possibly related to drinking. However, Ariadna's family did not accept that conclusion. They believed that the signs on her body could not be ignored. After pressuring the relevant authorities, the body was transferred to Mexico City for a second autopsy. This time, the results were completely different. The new report pointed to multiple head injuries and clear signs of resistance on the arms, details that had not been mentioned in the first examination. The second conclusion was, this was no simple accident. From that point on, the incident was no longer an unfortunate incident. but the beginning of a criminal investigation. After the second forensic report was released, the entire nature of the case changed immediately. The authorities were forced to change the direction of the investigation, from the hypothesis of an unexpected death to the suspicion of intentional harm. A list of the last people in contact with Ariadna was drawn up, and at the top of the list were two names that had been identified from the beginning: Vanessa and Rotel. Vanessa was summoned first. In the interrogation room, she initially remained calm, emphasizing that Ariadna had left Rautel's apartment around midnight, saying that she wanted to go home early because she was tired. According to her testimony, Vanessa said that Ariadna had called a taxi and left on her own. However, when asked to provide information about the driver or the booking application, she could not provide specific evidence. The police compared this statement with traffic data in the area near Rautel's apartment at that time. The results made them deeply suspicious. There were no cars that matched the time and place mentioned by Vanessa. In fact, no cars stopped in front of the building at that time. At this point, the investigation agency turned to other data: surveillance cameras inside and outside the building where Rautel lived. What they discovered changed the whole situation of the case. Early the next morning, a few hours after the party ended, the basement camera recorded Rautel taking the elevator down to the parking lot alone. On his shoulder was a motionless body, Ariadna. The image showed him moving hastily, opening the car door, and placing the body in the back seat in a hurry. Not at all like he was taking someone to the emergency room. He quickly left the parking lot, leaving no sign of contacting anyone. The video was backed up and thoroughly analyzed. This was no longer speculation. It was irrefutable visual evidence. When Rautel was called in to give his statement, he insisted that nothing unusual had happened. According to him, Ariadna had been drinking heavily, slept at his house, and when he woke up the next morning, she was unconscious. Panicked and afraid of being misunderstood, he decided to handle the situation alone, namely, take the body out of the house and leave it in a deserted place. This statement did not match the results of the autopsy. Experts confirmed that the injuries to Ariadna's head and hands could not have happened on their own. In addition, the act of moving the body instead of calling an ambulance increased the level of suspicion. During the investigation, the authorities seized electronic devices from both Vanessa and Rotel. Data from the phones showed that they were still in contact with each other for several days after the incident. Text messages between the two revealed strange conversations. Vanessa expressed concern about public pressure, while Rautel repeatedly assured her that it would be fine if we kept quiet. One text message also showed Vanessa asking if she should delete some pictures from my phone, and then doing just that. Data recovery experts recovered several photos from the party, some of which showed Ariadna sitting alone in a corner of the living room, looking pensive, detached from the bustling atmosphere around her. Notably, a friend of Ariadna's proactively contacted the police after hearing about her disappearance. The friend said that in the early hours of that morning, Ariadna had texted her expressing concern about an unpleasant conversation between her and Vanessa. The last message was sent at just after 2 a.m., after which there was no activity on the account. With the evidence gathered, a warrant for Rautel's arrest was issued. However, before the police arrived, he had left the city. After a few days in hiding, under pressure from public opinion and incontrovertible evidence, Rautel presented himself with his lawyer. He maintained his original statement, that he had not harmed Ariadna, but had mishandled the situation out of fear. Vanessa was arrested shortly thereafter. During the second interrogation, she was visibly confused, but still refused to admit to any wrongdoing. When asked why she had deleted the messages, she simply said that she didn't want to be misunderstood. The answer was not convincing enough. By then, the case had become the focus of the press. Public opinion was divided into two camps, one demanding that all responsibilities be clarified, the other condemning the local legal system for the initial inaccurate forensic conclusion. Based on photographic evidence, text messages, digital data, and the results of a second autopsy, both Rautel and Vanessa were charged with conspiracy to conceal the truth and cause serious consequences. The investigation is still ongoing, but the truth is slowly emerging, not from words but from actions captured on camera, messages that were not deleted in time, and the pain that cannot be hidden from those left behind. When the doors of the courtroom opened, the public was already waiting outside. Ariadna's name was no longer an unfamiliar one. It had become a symbol of a long search for justice, with too many twists and turns and suspicious silences. The trial began amid intense attention from the press and the public. Seats were full, cameras were trained on the defendant's area, where Rautel and Vanessa were brought in with contrasting expressions. One kept her cool, the other could not hide her tension. The prosecutors took turns presenting a series of digital evidence, from surveillance footage showing suspicious activity to a series of text messages deliberately misleading the investigation. The additional autopsy findings, which had been ignored, were now made public in the middle of the trial, like a silent indictment. Each piece of evidence was a piece of authenticity, not a story, but an undeniable trace. The defendant's lawyers tried to build their argument on the premise that Rautel had no intention of causing harm, that his actions were the result of fear, not malice. Vanessa, on the other hand, argued that she was just present, not directly involved in the consequences. But that defense fell short of the chain of events that had been revealed. The prosecution insisted, if this was just a mistake, why was there the deletion of data, the shaping of testimony, and the constant avoidance of responsibility? One of the quiet moments in the courtroom was when Ariadna's brother took the stand. In a low, steady voice, he recalled the last messages, the times Ariadna had laughed about the future, and the chilling feeling when she recognized her sister's tattoo in the crime scene photo. The room fell silent, no longer about the law, but about people facing real loss. At the end of the hearing, the judge read the long indictment. Although the trial is not yet over, the court has initially accepted both defendants for formal prosecution on serious charges. The case has been classified as gender-based violence, opening the way for the maximum penalty. In the courtroom, justice may not be done, but the door to truth has been opened. And for the first time since that fateful night, Ariadna is no longer a name in the newspapers, but a voice awakening a system in need of change. While the echoes of the testimony ended in the courtroom, outside, a child was still growing up every day with the question that could not be fully answered. Where did my mother go? Ariadna's brother, now the child's guardian, not only shouldered financial responsibility, but also preserved the memory of a mother who loved her child with all her heart. The case did not stop at the accusation or the verdict. It became a test of the entire system, where the truth can be delayed but cannot be hidden forever. Without public pressure, without a resilient family demanding justice to the end, perhaps the case would have ended with a cold conclusion: accident of unknown cause. Ariadna cannot speak, but her way of life, her independence, her love, and her alertness to the unusual speaks for her. It is a reminder that every choice, every relationship, and every silence has consequences. Society cannot change overnight, but stories like this can be a catalyst, not only to warn, but also to ask, what are we doing to protect the vulnerable? And when faced with injustice, will we stay silent or will we speak up? Down the hill. 3 short words uttered by a strange man, recorded on Libby's phone, sent a chill down the spine of the entire United States. This faint audio clip was not only the first key clue, but also the beginning of an investigation that would last nearly a decade. In February 2017, in the peaceful town of Delphi, Indiana, where people still leave their doors unlocked and children run free, two teenage girls were walking together on the Monon High Bridge Trail. It was a fresh afternoon. The sunlight filtered through the bare trees, and the sound of footsteps echoed on the old wooden bridge. Libby German, 14, and Abigail Abby Williams, 13, best friends who both love nature and are passionate about photography, were enjoying a moment of innocence that no one knew would be their last. When they disappeared, the whole town held its breath. A peaceful countryside is suddenly overshadowed by horror. Family, friends, and the nation are haunted by the blurry recording, the silent figure on the wooden bridge, and the question, who is Bridge Guy, the mysterious man seen in the last moments of the girls' lives? On the afternoon of February 13, 2017, like any other normal day in the small town of Delphi, Indiana, two girls, Libby German and Abby Williams, decided to take advantage of their midterm break to explore nature. They asked their relatives for permission to go hiking together on the Monon High Bridge Trail, a popular destination for those who love natural scenery and tranquility. Libby brought her phone to take pictures. At around 2:07 p.m., she took a photo of Abby standing in the middle of the high wooden bridge, posting it on the social network Snapchat as part of a simple walk. No one expected that it would be the last public trace of the two girls. Shortly after that moment, the two encountered a strange man. This person was wearing a dark blue jacket and a baseball cap, quietly following them on the long deserted bridge. The fresh air seemed to turn heavy, and something was wrong. Libby, with a rare presence of mind for a 14-year-old, quickly turned on the video mode on her phone. The clip lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to capture the image of a strange man approaching, and a deep voice softly saying, "Down the hill," a command that would later be identified as the most important clue to the suspect's identity. From that point on, the two lost contact completely. The family could not reach Libby by phone, and text messages went unanswered. When the girls did not return to the pickup point as agreed, relatives began to panic. A small-scale search was launched that evening, hoping that the two girls might just be lost somewhere in the woods. However, concern quickly turned to fear. Local police, along with rescue teams and volunteers, began to search the entire trail area. The weather turned cold and darkness fell between the bare trees of the winter forest, making the search more difficult. No one expected anything unusual to happen in a peaceful place like Delphi, but the sudden disappearance and the mysterious video on Libby's phone raised serious questions. Who was the man in the video? And what happened to Abby and Libby after their last steps on the high bridge? On the afternoon of February 13, 2017, after Libby and Abby failed to return on time as promised, the family immediately sensed something was wrong. Their repeated calls went unanswered, and their text messages went unanswered. As the weather began to turn cold and the sky darkened, the family's worries turned into concrete actions. They called the police and organized their own search. That same evening, authorities, along with dozens of volunteers, began searching the Monon High Bridge Trail area. They used flashlights, drones, and even dogs to scan trails, forest edges, and hard-to-reach locations. Every hill and riverbank was meticulously checked, but when night fell, no clear traces were discovered. Early the next morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day, a volunteer search party discovered a heartbreaking scene in the woods near the bridge. Not far from the Monon Bridge, the bodies of two young girls were found on a little-traveled trail. The news spread quickly, leaving the entire community in shock. The police immediately sealed off the scene. Forensic experts, investigators, and forensic teams began to collect evidence and carefully analyze the scene. Not long after, authorities confirmed that the two victims were Libby and Abby. The once peaceful town of Delphi became the epicenter of horror overnight. Those present that day said that the scene where the two girls were found was not at all like a normal accident. Although no official information was released at the time, The serious expressions on the faces of the police officers spoke of the seriousness of the incident. A criminal investigation was opened immediately. Locals, accustomed to the safety and friendliness of the countryside, were left bewildered. Not only were they mourning the two little girls, but they were also beginning to feel the sense of security they once had lost. Schools were stepping up security. Parents were more vigilant than ever. And with the deep sadness came an unanswered question. What happened in the woods that day? Who was with Libby and Abby in their final moments? And why? Immediately after Abby and Libby's bodies were found, the police immediately sealed off the forested area below the Monon Bridge. Investigation and forensic teams were quickly dispatched to begin the process of collecting evidence and examining the scene. The location where the two victims were found was close to each other, in a wooded area, not far from the main trail, but quite secluded. Although there were signs of trampling around, there was not much clear evidence of a violent struggle. This was what attracted special attention from the authorities. Upon closer inspection, forensic experts discovered that Libby and Abby's bodies were in unusual positions, with mismatched clothing. This detail was noted, but the cause was not made public. One point that puzzled investigators was that there was almost no blood at the scene, something that is rare in serious cases. The autopsy later determined that the time of death was around the afternoon of February 13th, which coincided with the time Libby sent the last photo. Near the scene of the incident, investigators discovered an unused bullet, which later became an important clue. Overall, the scene showed that this was not a spontaneous act, but rather a planned one. The lack of obvious blood and footprints made the case even more unpredictable and complicated. From the very beginning, a short video and audio clip found on Libby German's phone became central to the investigation. Although it lasted only a few seconds, the grainy footage captured a silhouette of a man walking across a wooden bridge, and the words "down the hill," believed to be his final words, snatched itself into the minds of investigators and the public. The man in the video quickly became known as Bridge Guy and became the focus of one of the largest manhunts in Indiana. Police released the images and audio to the media, appealing to the public for information. Thousands of tips poured in, from anonymous calls to vague claims of identification, but none were solid enough to lead to an arrest. In the 2 years since the murder, law enforcement has interviewed hundreds of people. Multiple investigative approaches were deployed in parallel, from tracing phone data in the area, checking surveillance cameras in nearby homes, to contacting the FBI to build a psychological profile of the suspect. Despite their relentless efforts, the case fell into a deadlock. In 2019, the police unexpectedly released a new sketch of the portrait, which looked younger than the original. At the same time, they shared a longer video showing how the man moved, a rare twist, but also did not bring an immediate breakthrough. For 5 years, the case has remained a haunting topic in Delphi and across the United States. Every year, on the anniversary of Libby and Abby's death, the community gathers at the memorial to light candles, remember and hope for justice. The two families have constantly campaigned for the media, created a website, posted a photo of Bridge Guy and a short audio clip, hoping that someone will recognize that familiar voice. The real breakthrough came in 2022, not from a cutting-edge technological discovery, but from persistence. A volunteer combing through the case files discovered a little-noticed account, a statement given to police in 2017 by a man named Richard Allen. In this affidavit, Allen stated that he was at the Monon High Bridge Trail on the afternoon of February 13th, when the girls went missing. However, he claimed that he had not interacted with anyone and was simply walking alone. Since there was nothing suspicious at the time, Allen's information was stored but not examined in depth. After this document was brought to attention again, investigators immediately began to verify Richard Allen's identity and activities. They discovered that he was currently living with his wife in Delphi, just a few blocks from the scene. A search warrant was issued. During the search of the house, police seized a pistol owned by Alan. After testing the unused bullet found near the victim's body, the results were surprising. The striations on the shell casing matched Alan's gun. This was an important forensic detail because even though the bullet had not been fired, the chamber imprint was clearly visible. Investigators continued to question people associated with Alan. His wife testified that Richard had been wearing a dark blue suit and baseball cap, an outfit that matched the suspect's image in Libby's video. Furthermore, Alan had not mentioned the hike since 2017, something that was considered unusual for a local who had been at the scene of a major crime. Police also discovered that Alan had worked near the bridge and was familiar with the terrain and side paths in the woods, factors that led them to believe he may have chosen the crime scene deliberately. After strengthening the case, the official arrest warrant was executed on October 26, 2022. Richard Allen was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The announcement of the arrest shocked the public. Many were shocked to learn that the suspect lived in the community, having worked at a pharmacy in town, a place where many residents had daily contact. Although Allen denied any involvement, physical evidence from the gun, statements from relatives, and the suspect's video were enough to bring him to trial. While awaiting trial, investigators continued to review other cases in the area to determine whether this was an isolated act or was related to other unsolved cases. The Delphi case ultimately proved not only a heartbreaking tragedy, but also a testament to the value of perseverance, both in the investigation and in the hope of the community. And it was Libby's calm, courageous act of quietly recording those fateful moments that helped bring the truth to light. After months of preparation and a series of preliminary hearings, Richard Allen's trial officially began in the fall of 2024 in the Carroll County Courthouse. This was not just a regular trial, but a milestone that the entire state of Indiana, and indeed the entire country, was watching with great interest. In the early days, the court made it clear that the trial would be conducted in public, with dozens of reporters, legal experts, and local residents filling the seats. The families of Libby and Abby were also present, silent but steadfast. They had waited nearly 8 years for this moment, when the truth would be revealed to justice. For the prosecution, the strategy focused on the weight of the scientific evidence. First, the unused bullet found near the scene, which bore markings that matched the gun identified as belonging to Allen. Next came the video recorded by Libby, with the image and voice of a man described as resembling Allen in appearance, voice, and movement. Witnesses were also called. Among them was the testimony of Allen's wife, who said he had been wearing the same outfit as in the video. Several residents also confirmed that they had seen Allen at the trailhead on the day of the incident. All of the testimony, combined with digital data and investigative records, formed a strong chain of arguments against the defendant. The defense tried to argue that the evidence was only circumstantial and that no eyewitnesses had seen the crime. Allen had also not changed his testimony since 2017. However, given the large amount of data and the reasonableness of the investigative sequence, the defense's argument was not convincing enough. After nearly 3 weeks of trial, the jury reached its final verdict. Richard Allen was guilty of murdering both victims. The verdict was announced in November 2024, a sentence of 130 years in prison, split evenly between the 2 charges, with no possibility of probation. When the verdict was read, the auditorium fell silent. There were no cheers, no big tears, just slight nods and a sense of relief from those who had waited so long for justice. Delphi, a village once accustomed to peace, had finally closed a painful chapter. Although the loss was irreparable, the truth had been brought to light and justice had been served to the best of human ability. The case of Abby and Libby is not only a heartbreaking tragedy for 2 families, but also a symbol of much greater things, about vigilance, perseverance in investigation, and the special role of the community in finding the truth. When looking back on the journey of nearly 8 years to reach the end, what makes many people linger is not only the loss of life, but also the time when justice was temporarily absent. During that time, the families of the two victims did not give up. They turned their grief into action, into a call, into positive pressure so that the case would not be forgotten. It was that determination that kept the flame of justice burning and, in the end, brought the truth to light. Libby herself, although only 14 years old, had an act of courage that was more courageous than an adult. She turned on the camera at the most dangerous moment. Thanks to those few seconds of recording, valuable clues were saved, contributing to the identification of the suspect. It was not only evidence, but also a testament to the intelligence, calmness, and determination of a teenage girl. The Delphi case also raises questions about seemingly ordinary things. A beautiful trail becomes a crime scene. A resident of the town who interacts with many people every day can be the center of suspicion. It reminds us that safety is never absolute, and that vigilance does not mean living in fear, but living consciously and understandingly about the community around us. There are many lessons to be learned from the story of Libby and Abby, about using technology to document unusual situations, about the power of social media, and especially about the value of time. Every day can bring a new step forward, as long as we do not give up. Today in Delphi, a small memorial has been built near the Manon Bridge, where it all began. It is not only a memorial to the two young women, but also a lasting reminder that sometimes the right things take a long time to come, but they will come if we keep believing and acting. What do you think about this 8-year journey to justice? What is the most troubling thing about that story?